everyone for coming. Thank you to the state of Qatar for hosting us very kindly. It's a wonderful city and we've had a very good time for the last few days. And thank you to BFQ and our embassy here for organizing this beautiful event. I want to start with a small story. My daughter is 11, so the photo you see is her trying to take her own selfies. And she's from Generation Alpha, so that's the generation after Gen Z. And she's definitely the most important person in my life. For me to be of any importance to her life, I usually have to convince her that I have thousands and millions of followers on Facebook and TikTok. And then she's like, Dad, what do you do for a living? Are you a famous YouTuber? What's your job? And I try to say that I bring investments to the country. And she's like, man, that's not really interesting enough. What is investment anyway? The reason I'm telling you this story, because I had to share this story to one of our partners who's a chief investment officer of one of the largest port operators in the world last week. He had a very similar experience with his children. I'll come to that in a minute. But what I would like you to take away from this slide is if you think back and think yourself that if your children or your nieces or your nephews asked you this evening, what do you really do? How do you make a difference? What's the contribution that you make to the society? What's your job? How would you answer that question? Let's hold on to that thought and we'll come back to this question or answer at the end of this presentation. So the reason I was meeting this gentleman last week was because our vision or ambition is to convert Bangladesh into a powerhouse for manufacturing. We'd like to see ourselves as the globe's factory, where we export all the way from Australia to Africa to Europe to the rest of the world. And our vision in the long run is that we would not only give space to our local investors, but we would also welcome our foreign investors to come and invest in Bangladesh. So to be able to do that, the biggest challenge you typically see is the port capacity. The port capacity usually determines whether you can become a factory to the world. And our ambition now is to change our port capacity and up it by 6 times in the next 5 years. One of which is actually a deep sea port, which enables us to circumvent some of the local regional ports and go straight to Europe or US. That's the global picture. But what about Bangladesh itself? Is Bangladesh itself an interesting market? And to that, I would say, yes, it is. So, the country is obviously hundreds and hundreds of years old, and we have our own heritage, our own culture that we are very proud of. But at the same time, if you look at the host of multinationals who have lived in our country for a long, long time, over 50 years, over 100 years, and if you ask them, was doing business in Bangladesh very easy? The answer is, of course not. It was one of the most difficult places to do business. But then why are they there? They're there because relative to the globe, the returns they get out of Bangladesh are generally much higher than what they get in the rest of the world. So, if that's really the case, is this enough to go for Bangladesh? Why are they getting this level of return? How are they getting this level of return? The reason they're getting this high level of return is the country, although it's very small, it's about a third of UK in terms of size, but in terms of population, we're 3 times UK, 180 million, and half of that population is actually less than 25 years old. The more important piece of data that you probably need to remember is the number of middle and affluent class people in our country. That's about 35 million. It grew about 2 times in the last 5 years, and 35 million, for just a general sense, is as big as the total population of Malaysia. So this market is hungry, this market is looking for more, this market is actually looking for a change. Beyond this market, we also have our regional markets, which you could potentially think of exporting into or using them as production destination, but using our ports to serve the rest of the world. So there is a 180 million local market, and beyond that, you have roughly about 300 million market if you consider the landlocked regions across us. So the obvious question that I hear a lot of times from our investors is, okay, sounds interesting. So where should we invest? Which industry should we go into? What is Bangladesh good at? I want to say Bangladesh is good at everything. But if you are starting in Bangladesh, maybe the starting point in Bangladesh should be focused based on this. This is called an FDI heat map. So we worked with a lot of international consultants, banks, and our partners to identify, based on our competitive advantage, which industries do we really think you could invest in and you could get a very, very good return out of. So the top left-hand corner, in this 2x2 matrix, is probably where you should be looking into. I'll cover a few of them today for just as a sort of teaser for all of you, but the material is available in our website. The material is available with us, so please feel free to reach out to us for more about that material. So let's start with healthcare and pharma, which we all feel very, very passionate about. Not sure if you are aware that for every 10,000 Bangladeshi, there are only 8 beds and only 3 nurses. The tertiary healthcare system has grown significantly in the last few years. So thousands and thousands of people, including my relatives, my friends, they all go abroad to take care of their own health, to take care of their parents, because they feel that specialized services are not available in Bangladesh yet. Again, I go back to that point. We're talking about 35 million middle and affluent class who have the ability, potentially, to spend money on healthcare, but they just don't have the service in Bangladesh. So if you think about pharmaceutical industry itself, manufacturing medicine, manufacturing vaccine, all the way to hospitals, all the way down to nursing schools, all these are potential investment opportunities. The other interesting piece is digital economy. You'd be very surprised to know that Bangladesh is actually one of the fastest adapters, because we leapfrog some of the historic baggages, and the financial wallet adoption rate is incredibly high in Bangladesh. The first unicorn that came out of Bangladesh was actually a mobile financial services company called Big Cash, funded by Ant Capital and Gates Foundation. So that the financial inclusion piece, the banking system, would be the other piece that I would highly recommend worth looking into. And then finally, the last industry that I would probably take you through is the IT outsourcing. Many companies have already started using Bangladesh's young workforce, this 25-year-olds, the 35-year-olds, and they're globally connected. They are not from our generation. These are Gen Zs who don't necessarily mentally belong to a country. They belong to the world. And I have come across many, many, many entrepreneurs who have a team in Europe, and they also have a copy team in Bangladesh, and their assessment is the quality of talent they get in Bangladesh is as good as the quality they get in Europe, just a tad cheaper. So if you look at the overall IT outsourcing industry, that's almost about $800 billion. Bangladesh only gets $2.6 billion. That's roughly about 0.004% of that pie. But the total youth of Bangladesh represents roughly 4% of global youth. Clearly there's a mismatch, and clearly there's an opportunity. There are many of these sorts. I'm not going to go into each of these industries, but I'm going to quickly touch upon one other point that is probably interesting for the investors who are looking at Bangladesh for the first time. As you probably know, we are a government of technocrats at this moment, or the government of geeks, and we have been working really hard to improve the overall investment climate. We spoke to hundreds of CEOs who are already in Bangladesh and came up with a set of deliverables that we would like to finish off by December. Some of them are short-term targets, some of which are here on the list. Some of them are long-term policy reforms, which we think will change the landscape. But these are policy reforms which you have to put on track. We will probably not be able to finish them, but we will kickstart them so that in the long run, whoever political government takes over, they can actually continue down the same path, and the direction of travel is in the right way. So I'll give you one or two examples here as well. So let's start with something that we are all very curious about, which is called true one-stop service. We've been talking about one-stop service, and the first day I joined the government, someone told me, you have multiple one-stop services, which means it's not really a one-stop service. The core elements of a successful or a proper one-stop service is probably to have a digital version of it, which is to make sure there's only one application or one platform that you go into and you get all the government services in one place. Or you also have the human version of it, where you have a relationship manager, just like in banks. You go to that relationship manager. The relationship manager walks you around the government alleys and helps you start business in Bangladesh. And we are trying to hybrid them, synthetically match them, and do a combination of both of them. That should be up and running by end of this year. The other thing that we are very keen on is something called a Private Sector Advisory Council. Now, since we've joined, we've realized that there is almost a artificial gap between private sector and public sector. A lot of times, obviously, the government is fragmented. That means decisions from government come in different shapes and forms. Sometimes the government is actually keen on helping the private sector, but the decision they take, which they take with completely good faith, they think that this is the right thing to do for private sector, is actually not the right thing to do for private sector. Private sector doesn't believe that was the decision or strategy government should have taken to help them. So there needs to be a bridge between government, potentially the head of state, and the private sector. And our idea around this is we are actually building something called a Private Sector Advisory Council, which will advise directly to the head of state on a regular basis, sit with them informally, and try to give them the feel of the ground, so that we remain grounded and we remain honest and accountable to the private sector. So these are some of the examples of what we're trying to do, and that's why we think this is probably the best time. If you had ever considered Bangladesh as an investment destination, this is probably one of the best times to land. And if we are able to do all of these, we are pretty confident that eventually we would become the working for the world country. What do we mean by that? We mean by that we'll be working for the world digitally, and we'll also be working for the world physically. And with the port capacity, our ambition to link the East and West, our ambition to bridge Himalayas to Bay of Bengal, we don't see any reason why you should not be thinking or running to go and invest in Bangladesh. So now let me take you back to the original story that I was talking about and tie it up all together. So when I met this gentleman, he's a Dutch gentleman, he was telling me that during Easter holidays, he had his son and his friends who were staying with him over the weekend. And they asked him the same question. So what do you do? He said, I'm the chief investment officer for one of the largest port operators in the world. I said, what does that even mean? And funnily enough, this port operator who operates in 63 countries, and they haven't even started in Bangladesh, they're looking at Bangladesh as an opportunity, and they've been working with us. He ended up giving the example of Bangladesh. He said, well, I am working to build a port in a country called Bangladesh, and when we build a port, on an annual basis, this amount of goods will be shipped. That would mean this number of employment for the Bangladeshis, thousands and thousands of jobs created, thousands of families living a happy life, And
Follow us on Facebook. Subscribe our YouTube channel. Get the latest update on www.daily-sun.com.